Hi, I'm Federico Pelliccia, an ethical wildlife photographer from Italy, and this is my YouTube channel, where I share with you my in-depth thoughts about photography and photography gear. Hopefully, I will also able to share with you some of my experience and adventures on the field very soon. So, if you like this content and you find it helpful for your photography, please be sure to click on the subscribe button below and leave a like on this video. Thank you very much for the support. You can find me also on Facebook and Instagram as Federico Pelliccia Pure Wildlife. Okay, let's start with today's video. Today we're going to talk about a lens from Canon that is finally the 800mm f11 lens. It is a cheap lens compared to any other super telephoto lens that offers the same magnification. So I think it's pretty interesting to review this lens, also because it's pretty affordable also for enthusiasts and for people who is approaching the wildlife photographer for the first time. So I'm going to share with you my in-depth thoughts about this lens after 4 months of ownership, and I used this lens extensively in various conditions because I took this lens with me on mountains, on ice and snow, into the woods. So various different conditions, but I've tested this lens and now I'm finally able to share my honestly opinion on this lens, because what you have to know is that I'm selling this. I've sold this lens recently. So before definitely saying goodbye to this lens, I want to share with you my opinion, because I think it's important, mainly because this lens is really underrated from wildlife photographers, and I think nobody really understands this lens deeply. So let's talk about this 800mm. The first thing that I want to talk about is the ergonomics. This lens fits really well on the hands. It's really a pleasure to use it on the field. All the buttons and the dials are placed in the right place. Here we have the autofocus ring that is pretty smooth and usable. I tested it on my Canon R5 to do some handheld shots with manual focusing, and it's really precise. And right before this ring we have another ring that is more tiny, and you can see it. Now I've got the protective lens coat on the lens, but I hope you can see this tiny little gear that is useful because you can pre-select a function that you can assign to this gear on the camera body. I use it for exposure compensation, and it's pretty useful because if you are in condition, for example when I was on the snow with a lot of light and difficult condition to manage, with this exposure compensation I was able to change in a fraction of a second the settings, and this is helpful for obtain always the perfect shots for the light condition on that specific moment. So not much to say about the ergonomics. This lens is stupidly light, fits well on the hand, it's a pleasure to use, so it gets the job done, definitely. The second thing I want to share with you is some functions of the lens. I've talked about the exposure compensation dial, and I want to show you also some different functions that you can customize on this lens. There's not much to say because you have only the stabilizer option on and off. You don't have different mode of stabilizing like another super telephoto lens. Then you have an autofocus and manual focus switch, and the focusing limiter with 2 options that are full and 20 meters to infinite. Honestly, I've used this lens always on full mode. So also on this side, not really much to say. Another thing that I want to share with you is the usage on the field. For me, it was really a pleasure to carry on this lens in my backpack. I appreciated very much this lightweight, because with the compact size and super light gear, I was able to have 800mm of focal length, and I tested it also with the 1.4x extender, and the image quality was still very usable. So this lens is able to deliver up to 1120 millimeters of focal length but you can also reach 1600 millimeters of focal length with the 2x teleconverter, but for my experience it's not usable. The images are very soft, too much soft with the 2x extender, and you don't have a real benefit to use this extender. But with the 1.4 teleconverter is pretty usable, and with the right conditions this lens can deliver you very excellent documentary files and also good and sharp photos. So having said that, I must say that use this lens on the field was really a pleasure for me, and I'm pretty sad to say goodbye to this lens, but I've sold this lens only because I'm considering to do something really different, and I think that my choice could surprise some of you. But having said that, let's talk about some pros and cons of the lens. So the first thing that I want to highlight of this lens is how much is light. It's stupidly light. It's 1.2 kilos, so it's really amazing to have all this focal length in so much compact size, and don't even feel this lens on the backpack. So you are able to do very long hikes without any kind of problems. It's like to put a kind of a bottle of water in your backpack. It's really a pleasure to carry on this lens. Also because I'm able to transport my big 600 millimeters f4 that is very heavy, so the difference is pretty much insane, and I've really enjoyed the mountain hikes with this lens. The second thing that I want to say is the autofocus of this lens. I don't have an example to show you, but trust me that the autofocus paired with a mirrorless from Canon, especially the R6 and the R5, is pretty amazing. The focusing area is limited on the frame. You cannot focus on the entire frame like on the other super telephoto lenses. It's limited to the central part of the sensor, and honestly I didn't find this very limiting, because the super stabilization of the lens paired with the IBIS of the R5 is able to deliver to you up to 7-8 stops of stabilization. So also tracking in-flight animals like birds in flight is very easy. I didn't have any problem to keep the subject on the AF area, and the autofocus is pretty fast because it locks on the eye and tracks the subject very well, like on the super telephoto lenses of last generation. So also on this side I didn't notice any kind of problem. The next thing is the stabilizer. The stabilization, as I said before, on this lens is amazing. I was able to do handheld shots up to 1/5 of a second with a really good consistency. So you have to consider this aspect, because you're able to push the shutter times to unbelievable values. This is helpful when you have to push down the ISOs. Obviously you can risk to have some motion blur, because when we talk about wildlife photography and animals, the animals are not still subjects, so they move around the frame and you have to track the animals. But with mammals I didn't find so much problems with ISOs, because usually they stop to watch you, to do some things, and in that precise moment you have all the possibilities to raise your shutter speed to unbelievable times and do the picture that you want. Obviously you cannot freeze the action of very poor light conditions, but you can do stills without any kind of problem. So it's always a compromise, and for me this lens is an excellent compromise. The next pro that I want to share with you is the sharpness. This lens is really sharp. I'm pretty sure that you cannot find anywhere 800 millimeters so much sharp at this price. So the next pro I want to share with you is the price, because you can buy this lens for 900 or 1000 euros, so it's pretty cheap compared to another alternatives. So you will not find on the market any alternative with this magnification power at this lightweight, with this price and this kind of sharpness. Okay, so keep it in mind. Having said the pros of this lens, obviously it carries on also some cons that I want to share with you. The first thing that I didn't really like of this lens, much more than the f11, is the weather sealing. This lens is not weather sealed. So to be honest, I took with me this lens also on the ice and snow, and I didn't have any problem. But sincerely, I wasn't so confident to put this lens on the snow and humidity, fog conditions and all these things, because as you can see, it didn't have any rubber piece of weather sealing around the lens, so the water and the humidity can penetrate in this position right on the attach of the camera to the lens, and you risk really much to destroy your camera or your lens. And this is not the thing, exactly the thing that you want to happen when you're doing wildlife photography. So this for me was really the biggest problem of this lens, because I don't think that would be very expensive for Canon to put a rubber ring on this lens and give some of weather sealing on this thing. So please, Canon, if you will ever do a next generation of this lens, put a weather sealing. Okay, the second cons that I want to share with you is this awkward locking ring, because in this size you cannot use this lens in this combination. Before taking a shot with this lens, you have to unlock this ring, okay, and extend the inner part of the lens to the shooting position. Okay, so if we add also this is not really compact, considering to travel with this thing on the backpack always extended. Imagine to be on a mountain and you see suddenly an animal that came out from the woods and you want to take a picture. You have to extract your gear from the backpacker really fast and point it and shoot. Okay, sincerely, you cannot travel with this thing extended on the backpack, so you have to put it on the bag in this position. But if you have to fastly do a shot, it's pretty awkward and uncomfortable to always do this operation on the field. But I think that this is something that you can learn to deal with. Okay, it's not really a big problem, but I found it pretty uncomfortable for me. The next thing that I wanna say about this lens that sometimes is really frustrating is the minimal focus distance. This lens has a huge minimal focus distance. I remember when I was on a mountain with some chamois in front of me. Suddenly a cub came out from the rocks, and I was like around 10 meters from it. I was here trying to do a shot, but the camera didn't focus. It was impossible for me to acquire the focus. So in the end, I've missed the shot, and it could happen and an animal suddenly came out and a short distance, and with this lens it's pretty difficult to get a shot on close range. So I really hope that Canon can fix this thing and put the minimal focus distance at around 6 or 7 meters. That I think it's definitely more usable. The next cons that I want to talk about is the value retention and resellability of this lens, because I struggled a lot to resell this lens because as I said before, so many photographers didn't understand in my opinion this lens, and so many photographers sees only the f11. But honestly, this is the less problem of this lens. I didn't have any kind of problem with the f11. Okay, so before talk about a lens, you probably have to test it on the field, in my opinion. So finally, for the last thing, we're going to talk about the f11. As I said before, for me the fixed f11 aperture wasn't a problem on the field, because as I said before, on the daylight you don't have any kind of problems. With this camera I'm able to shoot also at 20,000 or even 50,000 ISOs, and with the modern softwares of image post-processing like topaz noise, you are able to manage this noise without any kind of problem. And for me, so the f11 is not a big deal, it's not a problem, because you can say about the bokeh, okay, you don't have the creamy crisp bokeh of the of a 300 2.8, of a 400 2.8, or a 600mm f4, or a 500mm f4. But in the right conditions, if you are able to keep the eye level on the ground and to isolate the subject from the background, this lens can deliver also a great bokeh. So it's not impossible to get amazing shots also of mammals with this lens. So what about my conclusions? As you may have understood, I really like this lens. I strongly suggest you to purchase it if you want really high magnification power in a compact size and at low price. The only alternative on the Canon range for me is the 100 to 500 millimeters, but it costs about 3.5 times this lens. So the difference is pretty huge, and the 100 to 500 don't deliver to you the possibility to extend this lens up to 1120 millimeters of focal length. So this is another aspect to keep in mind. This is a great telephoto lens that can deliver you absolutely sharp and crisp images and beautiful images, also with mammals, and also even if in low light situations, if you are able to shoot at low shutter speeds. And in addition, this is also a great documentary lens. You can film an animal at 1 kilometer of distance with this lens, okay? So I think that is pretty amazing. One thing that I want to mention, that this lens doesn't have a foot, so you cannot transport the lens as you always do with the others telephoto lens from Canon. But I didn't find any problem for this, because this lens has so much stabilization that you don't even need a tripod. So you are super lightweight on your mountain hikes. And don't using a tripod, you are really free to choose the best solution, the best point of view. You can put yourself on the ground. You are able to move in all the position that you want. Also during stakeouts, and if you are on the hide, you don't need to put this thing on a tripod. You can simply put this lens on your legs and wait for the animals to come out, and then point and shoot. It's really simple. So definitely I strongly suggest you the purchase of this lens if you are an enthusiast, or if you want something with a great magnification power at low price. And this is an excellent compromise for me. I've sold this lens, as I said before, also only because I'm considering another different thing, and I need money to invest on my next project. But it's I think it will be a different thing, and you could be very surprised, and I cannot wait to share with you this my next adventure. So thank you very much for the attention, and see you soon in the next video. Goodbye.